San Diego Global Knowledge University.
Welcome. In this first part, we'll talk about the importance of organizational structures and changes in an organization. In the next few minutes, we'll look at how globalization, technology, and new ways of organizing are changing the world of work. More importantly, we'll see what this means for your career growth and for how productive organizations can be. We'll see why encouraging change is super important, how careers are being redefined, and what personal and organizational skills make a difference today. We'll also look at some interesting examples, from nature to the internet, and a practical way of thinking to understand complicated systems and make better choices. Get your notebooks ready. By the end, you'll have real tools to figure out what makes you special, build valuable relationships, and successfully handle your career changes. To really push for productive success, the ability to handle change and achieve success comes from both individuals and organizations. On a personal level, the change in organizations shows up in something we're seeing more and more. People, both men and women under 35, don't stay at their jobs for very long. In the United States, for example, the average 32-year-old has already worked for 9 different bosses or companies. While the U.S. economy creates over 100,000 jobs every month, an average of 300,000 people file for unemployment benefits every week. The laws and rules made to protect workers or employers in the United States, to guard them against unfairness in their social contract, haven't really worked well in this economy. In Europe, on the other hand, where it's generally harder to hire and fire employees, the unemployment rate has gone up. Meanwhile, in the United States, it's been around 4%, which is the lowest it's been in the last 30 years. So, governments need to get rid of old labor laws and rules that don't work anymore or are just outdated. They need to try and adapt to new, changing needs and find more flexible solutions. There are some big questions that come up with this topic. Should employees at all levels now take the lead to educate and re-educate themselves, to build their own personal brand, to know their own story and be ready to network? Are traditional jobs and technical careers disappearing from the international job market? The idea of single-focus careers is actually changing. It's not just about new jobs popping up because of changes. It's simply that today's professional career world is being redefined. Employers with real needs are redefining it. So, today's worker doesn't have, and most likely won't have, just one field they'll work in from one year to the next. Instead, things are changing, and that employer will likely have a problem they're trying to solve. This is driven by changing values or technologies. Globalization and technology have a big impact on everything an organization or company does. But also, many things are done locally, and these local changes have a lot to do with putting human beings back into that context. The trends in workplace dynamics and how we should organize ourselves to do things better. However, organizations pursue very different goals within each industry. It's likely that all these organizations are actually structured in a similar way. For example, most organizations probably operate with a hierarchical structure, where those at the top have more power, make more important decisions, and earn more money. It's also likely that we work for an entity that is public, or owned by someone else, or by many shareholders whom we've probably never met. It's also very likely that if we're working at a family-owned or sole proprietorship company, and it becomes a public company with shareholders in the near future, it's also very likely that at some point we'll be involved, at least once, in some kind of staff reduction program or organizational restructuring. This similarity in our work and organizational experiences shouldn't surprise us. If we had met 100 years ago to compare our work experiences within organizations, they would have been very diverse and different. Up until the last 4 decades of the 20th century, the structures of educational institutions, governments, and businesses were significantly different. When the pursuit of economic goals became a dominant force for everyone, organizational structures and our experiences within them began to become more similar and converge. One of the undeniable consequences of increasing globalization in recent years has been the elimination of differences in the criteria our societies use to define success and development. Clearly, the growth of the gross domestic product and economic efficiency have been the most dominant criteria for success in the second half of the 20th century and so far in the 21st century. A measure of the success these criteria have had is the fact that organizations we previously wouldn't have considered or viewed as economic entities, such as universities, government systems, and civil associations, are now beginning to structure themselves as productive enterprises, adopting the use of these economic success criteria. The world's largest residential real estate development company houses millions of individuals without using any organizational hierarchy. Here are the shareholders of this company. The termites. A termite mound can be up to 20 feet tall and include millions of termites. These mounds are formed with soil glued together by saliva and baked by the sun's rays. Because of their clever construction, the temperature inside one of these mounds is cooler and can be up to 10 degrees Fahrenheit less than outside. Each mound is built to satisfy its residents, but there are no architects, engineers, or construction supervisors. Somehow, each termite plays the necessary role to ensure the creation of this great feat of ecological engineering without needing any management or supervision. In fact, the role of each termite is so simple that it can be modeled on a computer using 3 basic rules. This simulation comes from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and shows us how computer-generated termites can build these large mounds using these 3 basic rules. The second case study refers to a system that is the most prolific, productive, and profitable small company on the planet today. This company produces, among other things, the best-known, most efficient, and most complex computer that exists, and it uses 100% biodegradable and recyclable components. This company has been running in its current form for thousands of years, and even then, it meets all the current international standards for how efficient its services are and how user-friendly it is. It's the biggest employer of people in the world, and it happily runs at high efficiency 365 days a year. Even though its operations follow daily and seasonal patterns, this original company is, of course, none other than the human body. And it does all of this without having a boss or leader in the corporate sense of the word. Besides showing that there are other ways to organize things, these 2 examples were chosen to make us think about how humans don't have the only good ideas for how to set up organizations. Even though human inventions rule our lives today, we shouldn't forget that Mother Nature has been creating organizational forms for billions of years. And she's been doing it with an efficiency and effectiveness that we humans are finding hard to match. We still have a lot to learn from nature about how to make our organizational designs fit with the production goals we're trying to achieve. Our last case study is something made by humans, but it's also the biggest and fastest growing system or business in the world today. It's different from what we usually think of. It's the biggest source of information on Earth, but no one owns it. Of course, I'm talking about the internet. It started as a way for smart people to talk to each other faster. Now, it's the most widespread way to get information on the planet. Even though huge amounts of money are made and lost on it every day, no one controls it or owns it. Its structure wasn't planned in any normal way either. The very first way humans organized themselves was in tribes. These were groups of people who were related and joined together to help each other survive. Tribes have been around for hundreds of thousands of years, much longer than any other way humans have organized themselves. These tribes have proven to be super effective for 2 main reasons. First, each person's role in the tribe changed over time to make the most of their special skills. And second, tribes were small enough that everyone could clearly see how important each person's role and contribution was to help the whole group survive. About 9,000 years ago, people started building permanent settlements. This was a new idea that tribal organization wasn't really set up for. The first cities not only made many tribes live closer together, but they also needed new ways for these groups to work with each other. For example, the walls of Jericho, the oldest city, were 30 feet wide and at least 20 feet tall. Inside this ancient city, up to 2,000 or 3,000 people lived, including craftspeople, builders, warriors, and leaders. Tribal groups before this couldn't have built such big structures. 3,000 people would have been too many to simply group together based on family ties. These early cities developed important social structures, including laws, rules, and cultural norms, to keep everyone together. The physical layout of the first cities, and how they were run, were different in various parts of the world. Some, like the first Roman cities, were built using the same plan to try and create identical physical and social structures. Others, like the first Chinese cities, grew and developed in their own unique ways, without the preferences of the powerful leaders. These ways of organizing changed to meet more and more new needs. Humans started doing things on a scale never tried before and experimented with many different organizational structures in their city projects. Over time, successful structures appeared that were then copied in other places when new projects started. Whole empires and ruling families were created this way, as those who organized themselves more effectively to get things done started to succeed more than those who couldn't. Entire empires, like the Roman Empire, also fell apart when their organization became too stiff and unyielding to handle new situations. Many books have been written about how civilizations rise and fall. For many years, people thought that improvements in farming were what sparked the growth of cities. However, in recent years, we've learned that many ancient cities were actually built near places where rare and valuable materials could be found. Things like salt, flint, or obsidian stone were dug up by the people living in the city and then traded, sometimes over long distances. Often, they traded these for food and other basic things they needed. It's now generally accepted that growing crops and taming animals came about sometime after these city settlements were already established. A lot of that early trade was a group effort where everyone in the city shared what they received. But it quickly turned into individual trading as special goods were created and started to be sold. There's clear proof of societies with different levels of power in all early cities, as some residents quickly became much richer than others. Cities grew big and complicated. We know that cities with more than 40,000 people existed over 5,000 years ago, and the size of the business dealings happening in these cities grew a lot. In places where goods were once directly exchanged or bartered, the growing complexity of trade led to the creation of different kinds of money. These coins made trading and buying and selling much easier. They made it possible for both buyers and sellers to get things that could be traded for other things. Soon it became impossible for any one person, even kings or emperors, to pay for or even control all the projects needed to build, keep, and grow a city or an empire. So, new and creative ways to get the money needed came about. Most of these involved putting together the money from many different people. For example, the first company with shareholders appeared in the 14th century, when a group of French grain farmers worked together to build a flour mill that no one person could pay for on their own. The Industrial Revolution changed how organizations worked a lot. For example, technology made it possible to share knowledge with more people, which changed the role of teachers forever. Technology also allowed for new ways of fighting wars and a level of trying out new things in military organization that had never been seen before. The fast growth of technology started to need a lot of money for investments. And to help protect investors from risk, the limited liability company was brought back on a bigger scale than ever before. At the start of the 20th century, human cleverness had already created different ways to organize. Through these, we could collectively produce what was needed. In professional service groups, the partnership began to offer a new way to recognize individual ownership and reward participation at the same time. In education, governments kept ownership and control of basic schooling institutions. They also supported the creation of strong, lasting, and independent higher education institutions. Government administrations started to create special administrative structures designed to handle various matters of public interest. And community organizations and civic associations also began to emerge as citizens looked for more practical ways to organize themselves. However, in business, one type of structure has always been the main one, the lasting legal entity we know as a commercial company or corporation, which has grown stronger over the last 200 years. But at the start of this new 21st century, the limited liability company is becoming the most common and powerful organizational structure on the planet. Interestingly, the first corporations weren't meant to last forever. They were made for specific reasons and usually had an end date, often no more than 20 years. But the speed at which professional groups, schools, government, and military organizations around the world are becoming more like corporations shows how successful this idea of working together has been. Some of the reasons why corporate structures have been so successful are clear. Corporate structures allow financial risks to be spread out. From the 14th century flour millers to the 20th century internet company, Amazon.com. The shareholder corporation has made each investor's responsibility for project risks very small. Corporations can take on huge projects and work all over the world. Lately, money has become more mobile, especially as society has become more global. This has helped these corporations grow. For example, there are now over 70 multinational corporations with more income than the entire country of Cuba's gross domestic product. This corporate structure model has become very good at handling multi-million-dollar projects. It also lets people with not a lot of money share and own things together. Even though some corporations were only owned by the rich, the number of everyday citizens who own shares is growing every year. In fact, the number of corporate shareholders is growing faster than the number of corporate employees. Big corporations, more visibly now, create wealth not just for their owners but for society as a whole. Even though corporations are set up and run in different ways, they all share some common organizational traits that we often overlook. The ownership structure in these corporations has completely separated from the management. Corporate organizations offer a very practical way for those with extra money to invest in productive projects without needing to be involved in them at all. It's the executive directors who are in charge of running the business. And it's understood that their duty is to protect the interests of the company's shareholders. This is even written into the business laws of most countries. As corporations have grown bigger, a second kind of separation or isolation has emerged, now between directors and workers. There's a growing trend to give workers less and less responsibility for the company's overall success. They're just seen as people who do specific tasks assigned by their bosses. There are some subtle problems behind this that are rarely talked about. Since a company has its own legal identity, we can talk about the corporation's goals and tell them apart from the goals of any person or group of people within it. It's even possible, and actually required, for those within the corporation to work towards those corporate goals, even if they go directly against their personal goals. The race to meet these corporate goals is what has supposedly justified the many recent programs of downsizing and organizational re-engineering. As we already know, these have been criticized for various reasons. So, corporations have really found a special spot in the world. They're seen as separate from the people who work inside them. They always act to get what's best for themselves, and they use and create huge amounts of money and wealth at the same time.
San Diego Global Knowledge University, Education Beyond Boundaries.